Hi guys, welcome to the Art of Server, and welcome back to part 7 of the R710 build series. So my original intention was to conclude this video series with this one video, which was going to cover installing Proxmox on the R710 and setting up a virtual machine to run PLEX, and to also show you guys that the GPU transcoding works in that special riser with the by 16 slot that I showed you a couple of videos ago. Turns out there's just a little bit more involved, and I felt like the content would really be better suited in multiple videos. And so this is going to be part 7, and I don't know if I should make it part 7, 8, 9, or just part 7, or part A, B, and C, or something like that. But anyway, so there's going to be a couple more videos on this R710. But we're going to start with today by installing Proxmox VE, which is a hypervisor similar to VMware, but uses open source technology. It's a very popular alternative to VMware, mainly because it's free, and it's been gaining a lot of popularity, and I think that popularity is driving a lot of development around Proxmox. And so over the last year and a half or 2 years, I've been seeing a lot of feature enhancements in Proxmox, so it's getting more and more advanced. And coincidentally, at the time of shooting this video, it looks like Proxmox 6.1 just got released. And so I'm going to go ahead and try that and see how that goes. Alright, so let's get started. This video, let me kind of just go over a little bit what the videos are going to be about that are going to follow this. So in this video, we're going to install Proxmox VE. I'm going to also show you how to remove the subscription nag, and we'll update it, and I'll show you the features within Proxmox to manage ZFS disk pools. So that's something that was added a couple of releases ago, so it's a fairly recent feature. A lot of people have been using Proxmox with ZFS, but it always required someone to kind of get on the command line and do the Proxmox stuff, the ZFS stuff, kind of under the hood, so to speak, and then use it within Proxmox. And the guys who developed Proxmox, I guess, probably noticed a lot of people were doing this, and they've added features within Proxmox administrative interface to handle the ZFS stuff, so that it's not kind of this side process to do the ZFS. So I'm going to cover all that in this video, and then I'm going to follow up with 2 other videos. One, I'm going to show you how to install the NVIDIA drivers on the Proxmox host in order to share that GPU for GPU acceleration applications and stuff like that. And so that is also somewhat involved. I actually tested that out before I started making these videos, and it was a little bit more complicated than I had expected. And we'll get into that when I get to that video. Okay, and then the third video to follow this is going to be about setting up PLEX and demonstrating that the GPU acceleration for transcoding works. Okay, so I know a couple of videos ago in the series I had demonstrated how to install a Quadro P2000 in the R710 with that special by 16 riser. And I know since then some people have wondered if that actually worked out, and it does work. But rather than just say, hey, it does work, I'd rather demonstrate it to you. So I'm going to create a video where I'm going to show you that GPU does work in the R710 with that riser, and that we can enable GPU transcoding in PLEX. Just as an example, of course, you could do all sorts of other stuff with that GPU, with CUDA applications or something else as well. So, but just a lot of people are using PLEX, and so I want to kind of at least demonstrate that we can use PLEX with the GPU that Quadro P2000 installed in the R710. Alright, so anyway, with all that said, let's get started on this video where we're going to install Proxmox. And like I said earlier, Proxmox VE 6.1 just got released at the time of this video. And so we're going to go ahead and try that out. So to get started, we got to download the Proxmox install ISO. And I'm also going to do, by the way, a remote install using the iDRAC interface. And so that might be kind of interesting to some of you guys if you want to play around with using virtual media and stuff like that. And I'll show you how all that works. Okay, so to start, we got to download Proxmox, and I'll just kind of show you where to download. You basically go to proxmox.com, and they have all sorts of different products. And I think they started actually with a mail gateway product and some other things, but the VE, which is the virtual environment product, seems to be one of the more popular products these days that I hear about. So anyway, this is the front page to their website. If you just click on downloads, you'll get a listing of all the various releases and ISOs, and so you can basically download it from here. And there's a direct download link here that will just be a direct download, and then there's a torrent that you can use as an alternative way to download this. So I've already downloaded this just to save time, but I just wanted to show you guys where, if you've never used Proxmox ever before, it's very, very easy to find it, and this is how, basically, okay? And so, like I said, I already downloaded Proxmox 6.1, as you can see here in my downloads folder. And this is an ISO image, so you can basically put this on a USB drive, or maybe even burn it onto like a DVD or CD optical disc of some sort and use that as an installer for Proxmox. But today, since we have the iDRAC interface and iDRAC does support virtual media, I'm going to show you how to do that. Alright, let's go ahead and begin the installation. Alright, so I'm going to start by logging into the iDRAC interface. And before we get started with the virtual media, there's a couple of settings we need to change. Alright, so once you're logged into the iDRAC interface, click on console/media over here. And you'll notice on the bottom half there's this table under virtual media, and the status currently is detached. We want to change that. So in order to change that, you have to click on the configuration up here, and we're going to change this to auto attach, and that way it will automatically detect that we have an ISO image mapped and all that stuff. And we're also going to choose this other option called enable boot once, because once the installation is done, we don't want to boot from the virtual media again during the reboot. We want to actually boot into the installation that we've completed. So by doing this, it'll just automatically kind of detach the virtual media so that we're not going to boot from it the second time. So go ahead and click apply here. Alright, and if we want to verify that these settings are now in effect, we'll click on Virtual Console and Virtual Media here, and now you'll see that status is auto attach and enable boot once is yes. Alright, so at this point we're going to go and launch the Java KVM app. And by the way, if you have a hard time with this Java KVM, I did make a couple of videos showing exactly how to do that. Or basically how to set up Java so that this will actually work. I'll leave a card in the corner of this video around this place so that you can find those videos. So if you have a hard time getting this to work, basically watch those videos and I'll show you exactly how to fix Java so that this will actually work. Alright, so at this point let me kind of go ahead and close these other windows so they're not in the way. So we'll click on Virtual Media, launch Virtual Media, and this window will pop up. We're going to add our image, which is the Proxmox 6.1 ISO. Open that up, and we'll click on Mapped, and then this will connect that ISO file to a virtual CD-ROM drive on the server. So at this point we can go ahead and power on the system. so when we get to this screen here, I'm going to hold down F11 so that we enter the boot manager. Now, if you don't have anything else installed on the system or didn't have anything installed previously, most likely it won't find any boot devices other than the virtual CD-ROM, and it would just default to booting that. But since I've been playing around with this machine, I'm going to press F11 to get to the boot manager so that I can specifically choose to boot off of the virtual media. Alright, so here we are in the boot manager screen, and I'll use the arrow keys to kind of go down the menu here. And so you'll see that under hard drives we have the embedded SATA port. So by the way, the system currently has a SSD connected to the SATA port A in the optical bay. I showed you guys that boot option in the previous video. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use that SSD to install Proxmox. And of course we also have the HBA card that's connected to the front 6 bays, but we're not going to do anything with that right now. And basically I'll keep pressing down until I get to virtual CD. And so that, if I select this, it's going to boot off of the ISO image that is now connected through the virtual media. So I'll go ahead and press enter here. Alright, so here is the bootloader for the installer. We'll go ahead and choose install Proxmox VE and hit enter. Alright, so here we are at the Proxmox EULA. We'll just kind of scroll through this and go ahead and click agree. Okay, so now we get to pick the target hard disk where we want to install Proxmox, and you'll see that there's the Intel SSD and the first hard drive connected to the HBA. Of course, we're going to click on the Intel SSD that is connected in the optical bay, and I'll click on options here. Now there's really not much here that you'll want to mess with other than maybe file system. I tend to have a preference for XFS. You can also pick ZFS options if, for example, you might be setting up some redundant SSDs as a pair or something like that to provide a little bit more redundancy to your system. But we only have one SSD here, so I'm just going to go ahead and pick XFS. Click OK, and we'll go to next. Alright, so it's asking me to enter for a country, so I'm in the United States. I will click on United States and then time zone. Yeah, this menu I find kind of hard. I'm using the mouse wheel to scroll down, but I wish there was some sort of scroll bar, because if you click on this, it just kind of closes the menu. Yeah, so that's not what I want. You know what, I'm going to use the arrows. I think that's probably the easiest way to navigate through this. Okay, so I'm on the west coast of the United States, so I'm going to pick America, Los Angeles for my time zone. English is fine, so let's click next. And we have to enter a password for the root account on the system, so I'll just enter something pretty generic. And it's asking for email address. Now you'll want to put an email address that is deliverable. This way you can get emails from the system when there is some sort of system alert or message. I'm going to go ahead and just put my Arta server Gmail account. Alright, and now we need to enter a IP address. So I'm going to pick let's say PVE1 as the name, and we'll do 192.168. I think I have assigned reserved 245 for this, and I have a net mask of 192, and the default gateway here is going to be 193, and as far as DNS is concerned, let's see. Hold on here. Come on. Alright. So those will be the settings that will work for me in this lab setup. We'll click next. Hostname does not, oh, okay. Well, let's see. Let's call it artofserver.com. Okay, so these are all the settings, and we'll go ahead and click install. And at this point, we basically just need to sit back and relax and let the installer complete. And so, by the way, as you're watching the installer do its job, you'll notice over here in the virtual media app, you'll see this kilobytes per second there changing. So like right now, and that's just a indicator that it's actually transmitting data from the ISO file on your local computer through the virtual media app to the server. So that's just kind of indicator that things are working accordingly. So, all right, so let's just sit back, relax, let this thing finish, and I'll come back when it's done. Alright, so it looks like the installation is done, and we'll go ahead and click reboot. And you'll notice here that the virtual media that's mapped is now automatically unmapped, and that's because we selected the option to only boot once. So at this point, I can go ahead and remove this image. We don't need it anymore, and I'll exit the virtual media window here. So now we just have to wait for the system to boot up in the freshly installed Proxmox 6.1. Okay, so we have Proxmox booted up now. Let me kind of move this to the side, and we'll go to the web interface. Alright, so all we have to do is type in HTTPS 192.168.0.245 and port 8006. And of course, it has a self-signed certificate, so we'll have to go ahead and accept that. Alright, so here we are at the login screen, and the username is root, and we'll enter the password that we entered during the initial installation. Alright, so once you log in, you're going to get this pop-up message that says you don't have a valid subscription. And so Proxmox is free, and it's based on open source software. It is free, but there is a subscription service that you can pay for in order to get timely updates and some technical support and whatnot from Proxmox. If you find Proxmox to be really helpful to you, I do recommend that you support the developers by buying a subscription if you can afford it. If you can't, or you're just experimenting with this right now and you want to kind of get rid of this nagging pop-up, I'm going to also show you how to do that today. Alright, so let's go ahead and just click OK on that for now. And in order to remove that nagging pop-up, there's a couple ways to do it. You can find all sorts of instructions online if you search for it. But the one way that I found to be most convenient is the script that is available on GitHub. So let me open up this here. So this is this script that it's not mine, it's provided by whoever owns this Git repository here, but it's a script that's very convenient. If you run this, it will do a couple things. One, it'll remove the subscription pop-up message, and it does that by editing a JavaScript file and basically changes one line of code and reverses the Boolean logic there. And it also changes the repository configuration so that instead of pointing to the default enterprise repository, which you would have to pay for the subscription for, you can use the no subscription repositories, and so it'll automatically take care of that. And the third thing that it does that I really appreciate is that, see, every time you apply an update, and if the update includes that JavaScript file that does that pop-up message, then any changes you make to that are going to be reversed, and you'll get the pop-up message again. And so a lot of times, if you do this manually, you have to make that change, and then every time you apply an update, you have to manually go back and make that change again. With this script, it actually sets up a trigger so that anytime those updates are applied, it automatically goes back and makes that change to the JavaScript file again for you. And so that way, the change to prevent that pop-up message from showing is more or less permanent, unless something drastic happens to the code and the way that this script modifies it no longer works. Then maybe it might not work at that point, but for the most part, this is actually very convenient. So in order to apply this, we do have to get on the command line a little bit. So let me move this up here and scroll this down a little bit so we can kind of see the commands we need to run. So I'll go ahead and log in on the console here. And first, let's see if we have wget here, because we'll need that. Okay, so we have wget, and we're going to download this install script from this URL here. Let's see if I have that right. Git hub user content. Okay. Oops. Whoa. What's going on with my keyboard? Come on. Objects. PVE nag. Buster. Master install.sh. Alright. So now we have the install script here. We need to give it execute permission in order to run it, and then we can go ahead and run it. Now I normally recommend that if you're going to install something or run a program that you just pulled off the internet, especially if it's a script, which is usually fairly simple, I do recommend that you kind of look through it and understand it a little bit and understand what it's doing. You never know what you get off the internet. This looks pretty legit, but you never know. So it's always good practice to kind of just take a look and see if there's anything suspicious in the script. I've already looked over this. It looked pretty good to me, so I'm going to go ahead and just run it. Okay, so one of the things that, like I had mentioned earlier, the first thing it's going to do is remove the nagging pop-up by editing a JavaScript file. And then the second thing it's going to do is change the repository configuration. So just to show you what that actually is, I'll show you where it's making that change. So if you go to etc apt, I believe, and I think it's sources.list.d, okay, there are files here. So any file that ends in .list is active. And if you change the extension of the file to something other than .list, it basically deactivates it. So you'll see that there's this pve-enterprise.disabled. So that file is now currently disabled, and this has the PV Enterprise repository configured. And so we're not going to use that because we're going to use this without the subscription. And you'll see instead that there is a no subscription pv-no subscription list, and this points to the no subscription repository. And I'll see a little comment here that shows you that this basically was created by that install script. Alright, so now that we have that change in place, we should no longer see that pop-up message. So if we go back to this the Proxmox interface. Now if I log out and now try to log back in, okay, you're still going to see the pop-up message. Okay, now the reason for this is because remember that this is being done by a JavaScript code, and it's client side basically. So the first time you log in, that JavaScript is downloaded to your client side and it's cached most of the time. Most browsers will cache things like that. And so even though the file has changed on the server, your browser is still running a cached version of the previous version of that script. So in order to fix this, if you run into this, go ahead and click OK on that. We'll log out again. And I'm just going to hold Shift and refresh. And this will force the browser to basically re-download the all the content, including that JavaScript. So now that it's refreshed with a Shift refresh, we'll log in again, and this time, if everything's done right, there will not be a pop-up message anymore. Okay, so that's one thing that kind of gets people, is that they'll make the change and they'll say, okay, I've made the change necessary to get rid of that pop-up, but I'm still getting that pop-up every time I log in. Well, it's because it's JavaScript, it's cached on the client side, and you need to refresh your browser and force it to re-download that script to your browser in order for that to actually be to take effect. Okay, all right. So now that we have the Proxmox installed, we have the pop-up message removed, and most importantly, before the next step, which is to update the system, we've also changed to the no subscription repository. Now that's important because in the next step, we're going to tell the system to pull down all the metadata for any available updates or packages, and we don't want to point it to the wrong repository. Otherwise, it'll try to pull the metadata for the subscription-based repository, and that's not what we want if we're going to go ahead and use this without a subscription. All right, so in order to do the updates at this point, now there's many ways you can do this. You can do the updates on the command line, certainly, but I'm going to kind of show you guys how to do it through the web interface, just because that's probably the most common interface that you guys are going to be using. So you select the server that you want to update, and then it's really simple. You just come down this sub menu here, click on updates. Now the first thing you want to do is click refresh, and this is the step that forces the download of all the metadata for the available packages. And so here you'll see that it's pulling down the metadata, and you'll notice here, where is it? So you'll see here, number 8 here, it says it's pulling down the PVE no subscription list of packages, right? And so that's the reason why you want to make sure that you've made those changes before you do this. Otherwise, it'll be pulling from a different repository. So anyway, we've got everything pulled down, and then at this point we can close this, and then we can click on upgrade, and it's going to attempt to update the system. So you'll see this command, by the way, up here, apt-get this upgrade. That would be the command that you would normally run on the command line if you were doing this on the command line. But the GUI basically just runs that command for you. Alright, so it's not finding any updates, and that's kind of expected at this point, because Proxmox VE 6.1 was just released, so there are probably no updates for it at this point. But if there were, you would see some activity here, and it will show you kind of what it's doing. Alright, so we can go ahead and close this. So now we have the system fully updated. We've got the pop-up message removed. The last thing I want to do in this video is set up the storage. Alright, so let's go and do that. And so one of the features that was added a couple of releases ago now, I don't quite remember, but it's a fairly recent release feature, is that there's now support for ZFS within the interface. Before this feature was added, a lot of times you had to get on the command line and run some zpool commands manually in order to make use of it. And so this is kind of makes it really nice and a little bit more user-friendly. So we'll go ahead and click on under the disk category, we'll click on ZFS, and here you'll see a button to create a ZFS disk pool. So we'll go ahead and click on that. And the first thing we want to do is name this. So I'll call this data 1. Okay, just you can name it anything you want, really. We have 6 disks, and I want a good amount of redundancy to be resilient against any disk failures. So I'm going to pick RAID Z2 in this case, and the other settings we'll kind of just leave as default. We're going to create a disk pool using all 6 disks, so I'll just check that box to select all the disks, and we'll click create. Alright, and that's it. And now we have a ZFS disk pool with about 22 terabytes of space available. And this is now called Data 1. And so from this point on, you can create virtual machines or containers and use the space within this disk pool to provide storage for your virtual machines or containers. Alright, so that's basically it. So that's kind of where I'm going to end this video for today, and I'll continue in the next video by showing you how to set up the NVIDIA drivers. So actually here, let's go to the console here. I just kind of want to show you something. Let's see if do we have LSPCI. Let's see if we do. And I'm going to grep for VGA, because I'm looking for video controllers. Okay, so you'll notice that there are 2 video controls. One's the onboard Matrox video card, and that's just part of the PowerEdge R710 server. But if you remember from a couple videos ago, I showed you how to install a GPU with using that by 16 riser. So I have that GPU installed in here. The system works. It boots up. It's fine. There's no complaints. You saw the system boot up earlier. You know, so it works fine. So here we have, you can still see it here at PCI address 06, this Quadro P2000. So in order to make use of this graphics card, we need the drivers, and the best drivers for this is really the NVIDIA drivers. The open source drivers are not so great, especially if you're going to be using this for GPU acceleration applications. In the case that I'm planning to use this for, I want to enable PLEX GPU transcoding with this graphics card. So we need to install the drivers for this video card from NVIDIA, and I'm going to show you how to do that within Proxmox. Alright, so anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it's been helpful for anybody who wants to install Proxmox on your R710 and set up the storage with ZFS and whatnot. I hope all this has been useful. If you liked it, please give me a like, and remember to subscribe to see more videos from me. Alright, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.